Hi 6th graders, today we are going to be working on the first part of lesson 2.2, which is all about representing decimals. Our learning target is that I can compare and order decimals using a number line. So go ahead and pause the video until you have the top part all filled out. Alright, let's get started. So today we are only doing the first page. Tomorrow we will do the second page. Alright, so let's get started. The first section is telling us to divide the number line into tenths and then place each decimal on the number line. So to divide into tenths, that means we are going from 0 to 1, and we want to put 10 lines on here, and then put where they are on our number line. So I like to first split it in half, and we know halfway is 0.5, or 5/10. Okay, so now I need a 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, and a 4/10. So go ahead and do your best at placing these lines as even as you can, but it's not going to be perfect. Mine is definitely not perfect. So I have 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, and 0.4. Now I also need to do the same thing on the other side. I need 4 more lines to get from 0.5 to 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, and 0.9. And then label all of these spots on your number line. Try to make this a little bit neater. Alright, so once you have all of your tenths on your number line, you have done the first step. Now we need to place each decimal over here on our number line. So let's start with A. Change your color to red, please. And we are doing 7/10. So we need to find 7/10 on our number line and place it there. So if you notice, each of these is a tenth. And since it's just 7/10, our dot is going to go right here at 0.7. And then let's label it as A. So that one's the easiest one out of the group. Now let's move on to B. You need blue, so change your color to blue, please. Now we are doing 0 and 35/100. So let's take a look over here. Here's 0.3 right here, 3/10. It wasn't exactly 3/10, but it wasn't 4/10. So that means it's going to be somewhere in between 3/10 and 4/10. Since it was 0.35, which is 35/100, it's going to be right about in the middle there. So this right here is point B, and then go ahead and label it. Awesome, moving on to letter C, change your pen to green. This time we have 0 and 183 thousandths. So this one's a little bit trickier. We know we're going to be somewhere after the 1/10. So if we go over to our number line, here's 1/10 right here. It's not quite 1/10, but it's not quite 2/10. So it was 0.183, I believe. Yep, so that means 0.1 it's somewhere in between 0.1 and 0.2. 0.18 tells us it's pretty close to the 2, but not quite. So I'm going to put my dot right about there. And then I'm going to label it as C. Awesome, and the last one is letter D. Change your color to yellow. Letter D is 0 and 9/100. So if we take a look here, we don't even have it at 1/10 yet. So that means it's between 0 and 1/10. So here's 0 and 1/10. Here's 0.09. So that tells us it's not at 0, it's not at 1/10, it's somewhere in between here. And it's about close to 1/10. Because all we'd have to do is add 1/100th and then it would be 1/10. So this is point D. Awesome, so you should have divided your number line into tenths and then placed those decimals on the number line. Now this next part, we are going to be doing a lot of writing and zooming in. We're going to pretend we're a magnifying glass. So what I would like you to do for number 1 is just flip your iPad over and watch this video if you're watching it on the screen. If you're watching it on your iPad, do not worry about writing it down. You are only going to be watching me as I do it. Alright, so let's get started. We have 8 and 153 thousandths. So we are going to figure out exactly where it is on these 3 number lines. But to start, we want to split this number line into tenths, our top one. So we are going from 8 and 0/10, that's what 8 means. And then we need to label it all the way across. So this first line is 8 and 1/10, 8 and 2/10, 8 and 3/10, 8 and 4/10, and so on. Okay, remember you're just watching me right now. You're not actually doing it. 8.8, 8.9, and then this last one is 9.0. All right, so now we need to place our number on the number line. So 8 and 153 thousandths, well, it tells us we're going to be past the 8.1 mark, but we're not quite to the 8.2 mark. So we're somewhere in here. I'm going to put my dot about here. All right, so now we're pretending we are a magnifying glass. We want to magnify this area right here. So we know our dot is between 8.1 and 8.2. So that's what goes over here. We have 8.1, and then this far side is 8.2. And now we're going to do essentially the same thing, but a little bit different. Now, this first line, we broke it into tenths. The second number line, we're going to break it into hundredths. So I'll show you what that means. So the first line really means 8 and 10 tenths, or 10 hundredths. Okay, our next one is 8 and 11 hundredths, and then 8 and 12 hundredths, 8 and 13 hundredths, 8 and 14, 8 and 15, and so on until we get all the way to the end. And then our last one is just 8 and 20 hundredths. Okay, so all we did is we broke this section up into another number line. All right, now we need to find where our number would go. Well, our number is 8 and 153 thousandths. So if we take a look, we're looking for the 8.15. Well, here's 8.15 right here, but it's not quite at 8.15. It's somewhere in between here. So our dot is going to go somewhere in between here. Now we still don't know exactly where that number goes, where that dot goes. So we're going to pretend to be magnifying glasses and zoom into this section right here. All right, so we are going between 8 and 15 hundredths and 8 and 16 hundredths. All right, so now we broke our first one into tenths, our second one into hundredths. This last one we're going to break into thousandths. Again, remember, you're just watching me. You're not actually doing this one. All right, so this really stands for 8 and 150 thousandths. And then 8 and 151 thousandths. 8 and 152 thousandths. And so on. Okay, so I'm going to fill this all the way out. 8 and 155 thousandths, 8 and 156 thousandths. And if you notice, I'm writing sideways because if I tried writing it all in a line together, it would be so messy nobody would be able to read it. So when we practice the next one, oops, I wrote that wrong number. When we practice the next one, you're going to want to do the exact same thing as I did. Man, I wrote that number totally wrong. Sorry about that. All right, and then our last one is 8 and 160. So now that we're broken into thousandths, we can find exactly where this number goes on our number line. 8.153 goes right here, and that is our final answer. All right, I hope that made sense. If it didn't, we're going to practice that again in number 2. So now you can flip your iPads back over, and now we're going to do number 2 together. So this time we have 3 and 782 thousandths. Okay, so first we need to split our number line into tenths. So we have 3 and 0 tenths, 3 and 1 tenths, 3 and 2 tenths, 3 and 3 tenths, and then keep going until you are all the way at the end. 3 and 5 tenths, 3 and 6 tenths, 3 and 7 tenths, and then lastly we have 4 and 0 tenths. All right, so once you have your number line filled out, now we need to place our dot. So we are looking at 3 and 782 thousandths. Well, I see this 7, so that tells me I'm going to be here. But I'm not quite at 3.7. There's more to it. So I'm going to put my dot towards the end of that section. Okay, that's about where 3.782 would go. And remember, it's not exact because we don't have the numbers that show us exactly where it is. So now we're going to be a magnifying glass and we're going to zoom into this section and we're going to look at hundredths. Okay, so we were going from 3 7/10 all the way to 3 8/10. Okay, so now we're doing two numbers after the decimal point. We get 3.70, 3.71, 3.72, 3.73, and so on until we have listed all of them. Alright, and then your last one is 3.80. So now our dot is at 3.782. So let's find that on our number line. 3.78 somewhere in here, but it's not quite at 3.78, so it's going to be somewhere in here. Go ahead and stick your dot somewhere in there. Alright, now we're going to be magnifying glasses again, and we're going to zoom into this section one last time. So now we're going from 3.78, or 3 7/78, to 3 7/79. Alright, now we need to split this up into thousandths. This is the last number line you'll have to fill out for right now. So 3.780, and then 3.781, 3.782, 3.783, and so on. Go ahead and take a second and fill this out. And remember, write sideways so that you have plenty of room and it's easy to read. If it's just chicken scratch, which means if I can't read it, you're going to have to fix it. And I don't want you to have to fix it. So make sure I can read it and it's neat. So our last one is 3.790. Alright, now we can find exactly where our number is on our number line. So it's 3.782, which is exactly right there. Alright, so we are done with finding the value of a number using different number lines. Okay, if that did not make sense, please make sure that you send me a message on Schoology and I will help you out. Alright, the last section we're doing today. We are going to be estimating where our decimal is at each letter. So if we take a look at number 1, we have this wonderful number line. Okay, we need to estimate. Estimate means that we are not all going to have the exact same answer, and that's okay. We don't know exactly where it is. We can use our best guesses by looking at what we already know, but we aren't going to know exactly where it's supposed to be on the number line. So if we take a look at letter A, we know it's between 0 and 1/2. 1/2 is the exact same as 0.5. So go ahead and write that down. Alright, so if it's not quite to 0.5, we need to guess on where we think it would be. Well, if I were to split my number line into tenths, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, and 0.4, I would guess that this is probably a little past 0.3. So I'm not going to say it's exactly 0.3. I'm going to say it's like 0.34. Take your best guess. Maybe you think it's 0.32. That's totally fine. But we know it's for sure not 1/10. We know it's not 2/10. And we know it's not 4/10. So it's somewhere in between 3/10 and 4/10. Alright, taking a look at letter B. This time our number is between 5/10 and 1. So again, go ahead and draw your 4 lines. So 6/10, 7/10, 8/10, 9/10. And label it. Makes it so much easier. Alright, so letter B, according to my lines, yours might be a little different. It's not quite at 0.6. It's a little past it. So I'm going to guess that this is at 0.6. We'll do 2. 0.62. Okay, we're just taking a guess. If you think it's 0.66, that's fine too. Letter C. I already had my lines drawn in. I don't think it's quite at 0.8, so I'm going to guess it's at 0.78. Not quite to 0.8, but it's pretty close. Alright, and our last one, letter D. According to the lines that I drew, I would say this is pretty close to 1, but it's not quite at 1. So I'm going to guess it's 0.95. Okay, remember these are estimates. As long as your number is pretty close to what mine was, you will be good to go. Alright, you go ahead and you try number 2 on your own and then come back and check your work. So pause the video so you can do it on your own and then come back and see what I got. See if we got the same thing. Alright, so if you're back, here's what I got. I'm going to split my line because remember, 1/2 is the same as 0.5. I'm going to say A is pretty close to 0.3. I'm going to say 0.31 just to make it more fancy. Alright, letter B. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to say letter B is at about 0.58. Okay, remember if your number is pretty close to that, then you are good. Letter C, I'm going to say it's about 0.75. And then lastly, letter D is kind of a tricky one because it's bigger than 1. So it would go 1, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. So I'm going to say it's about 1.22. Remember, our estimates are not going to be identical to the people sitting around us, and that's okay as long as they are pretty close. Alright, so that is all we are doing today. If you have any questions, please send me a message on Schoology. Otherwise, you can go ahead and get started on the assignments for today. Remember, we're not finishing the whole worksheet for 2.2 until tomorrow, so do not turn it in until it is all the way finished. Alright, have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye!